Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Midnight Texas. Quite a few things went down in this episode, so let's break everything down. Manfred is helping out patients with the whole, because it turns out the hotel is actually haunted. At first, it's kind of like, oh man, it must be this woman who was an owner back in the day named Carolyn. But it turns out it's actually, Carolyn and her husband, Bruce, which I love how that whole scene ended up breaking down. Well, for one, just the whole fact of the matter, it's just like that kind of little bit of a red herring I thought was kind of neat. But also later on when they're possessing Manfred, he's almost kind of, it didn't work out like that, but you can almost, he's like a mediator. He's almost kind of like a marriage counselor in that sense. They're kind of going back and forth while inside of his body, and he kind of has to talk to him. Because it turns out Bruce is very obsessive. Like, he always thought Carolyn was cheating on him. And the fact of the matter is, Carolyn was like, hey, since you moved us all the way out here because you thought I was cheating, so I figured I might as well have a little fun because you already thought that of me. And at least other people wouldn't scare me the way you did. And it's like, oh, I only killed you because I loved you and I couldn't take the chance you'd leave me, which is like, yeah. I even love him being like, oh, you'll help me out talking to Manfred. Manfred's like, dude, no, you're evil. No way in hell I'm helping you. I'm totally on Carolyn's side. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Because at first, too, I was wondering about that. Because it's like, oh, like a ghost shouldn't be able to hurt someone. But it's like, oh, yeah. Like, I mean, in this universe, I mean, more so like the fact it's them crossing salt. But it's like, oh, because he's died in a hotel. In particular, that hotel room, he has control over it. So I guess it's just kind of like open the window and kind of summon up a gust to kind of move away the sand and stuff like that. But also, Manfred had said it like if the Ghost is old enough and angry enough, they get stronger. So the bastard killed his wife and then killed himself because it's like, oh, we'll be together forever. Even their bodies kind of bound together. It's kind of interesting how that ends up tying together with Manfred's story because he's thinking about Creek. And I guess this whole circumstances of this guy who's very obsessive about someone kind of made him, because like Manfred wasn't ready to let Creek go because, for one, Creek was the first person he's ever gotten attached to who knew about who he was and accepted him for being who he was. Yeah, it's just kind of in that kind of like weird ballpark right now, just because it's like, oh, almost seems like you being who you are kind of made her kind of step away just because it's like, but more so it's just the circumstances of everything, which I'm wondering, like with Manfred's whole situation, if they had gone to all sin together, like would that have been the case? Because I was kind of under that impression, like we probably wouldn't be seeing Creek for the rest of the season. I don't know, she might still pop up later on at some point in time, but nevertheless, he was basically got in his head that basically like, hey, I need to let her go because even he wasn't willing to. It's like, no, we didn't break up. We're on a break. It's like, no. He kept telling everyone he was okay when in actuality he wasn't. It kind of rocked him a lot more because even the whole situation of like the initial situation of like, oh man, Bruce was so heartbroken over losing Carol, and it's like, yeah, he thought they were going to be forever, and then he lost him, which is kind of interesting because like the whole aspect of forever kind of plays a big part in this episode. But I'll kind of dive into that in a little bit. But it was so interesting by the fact is that when it was all said and done, like, give her time, maybe she'll come back to me. But even if she doesn't, that's 100% on her choice, and so I can't really force the matter. So he's just going to stay here. Which there was a part of my brain going, you don't think this episode kind of made me feel like they were hinting at kind of a Manfred impatience thing, even though yeah she's married and everything, I know, but it just seemed like, I don't know, the fact is they bonded in this episode kind of made me go, especially because it seems like Kai might be in that situation where he doesn't really listen to anyone. Because it's also interesting because it seems like Kai's thing, whatever it is, needs balance, because for him it's like they were going to cast a spell that was going to make it so that none of the dead could come to the hotel, but Kai was like, no, because life and death kind of go hand in hand, and for him to do what he does, he needs all that, I guess, energy kind of flowing. He needs, like I don't know what his whole deal is. We don't fully understand that yet, so I'm very interested in that. But the fact is, he was kind of doing something later on, which I'll kind of get to later on. Well, when he cures Donnet, I guess I'll dive into that more. But like even patients, like maybe you shouldn't do that. Is it because of his health, or just like what kind of strain it puts on his body, or is it just more so the fact is it's like, I don't know, that's why I'm kind of feeling like there might be the whole Manfred and her thing, just because it's like, oh, he doesn't really listen to me, and it just kind of maybe things have kind of been distance between him anyway, because he's so focused on his work. Might see that, maybe not, because she had already, when she was discussing the whole Creek thing, she was like, oh yeah, with the sweet comes a whole lot of bitter, so I was like, so it kind of makes you almost, and the way she was acting, almost like things aren't 100% copacetic between her and Kai, but we'll have to wait and see on that front. On the other side of things, we had the whole Lim situation, the problem between him and Olivia, because obviously you expect it to come up. It's the whole downside of them being connected. I love it coming up multiple times in the episode. And he's like, "Yo, yeah, I'm glad I have a psychic connection or I wouldn't know how angry you are right now. I wouldn't be able to tell at the very least." But to be fair, it kind of makes sense because it's that situation of like, because for Olivia, someone who is very independent, it's kind of like it sucks for him to kind of always be there. It's like, I can handle things on my own. I don't need your protection, because she's kind of had to fend for herself for such a long time. But I think it also for Lim, it affects him in a sense of like, well, ends up explaining it later on. It literally feels like just burning inside of him. I'm like, I gotta go. Olivia needs me. So it's more so something he can't control. It's like an impulse, and it's just this feeling of just like, there's just burning inside of him until he goes to her aid. But at the same time, it's like, as a vampire, Lemuel kind of aims for, like, it's kind of probably like to be forever, but Olivia doesn't want to be a vampire, and that's the only way to get rid of this whole situation of their psychic connection. So, but like I said, like the whole psychic connection seemed like it kind of goes hand in hand with the whole being vampires and stuff, because even Bobo was like, "Oh, you and Olivia are meant to be forever," and even Lim's kind of like, "Yeah, but we're not." And it's kind of like, that's still there. It's a fight that they're trying to avoid, because obviously it caused a lot of problems last season, but it's like, it's still a big thing of like, Olivia will eventually grow old and die, and Lemuel will kind of be left alone again. So there kind of plays that role in it. I was so curious to see what Donette's story would end up being, because it's like, "Oh, I want you to make me a vampire." And then she basically poisoned him with silver so that she could take advantage of him. And it's like, "Oh, you bit me," and everything. And I love Olivia being like, "Okay, don't worry, I'm gonna uncomplicate this for you." It's like, she's been through a lot. That's no excuse. Her boyfriend's a 40-year-old DJ. Still no excuse. And I love that. She ended up wreaking havoc in the strip club, killing her boyfriend, as well as turning two other strippers. They went to Kai's place because she was pissed because Kai wouldn't give her the time of day, even give her an opportunity to get the job. So it's interesting when it's all said and done. Going back to it, Kai was able to cure her. I was like, "Oh man, he can cure vampirism." And I even love because once again, it's like, what is it he's pulling out of people? Like, obviously it seems like it's just pain in some regards, but I guess it's like, yeah. And at first I was like, "Oh, he can cure vampires." And then Manfred says, like, he can cure supernaturals. I was like, "Oh, this goes beyond that." And I guess that's the essence of a supernatural. Maybe different supernaturals are a different color or something like that. Because we never really see what it is when he pulls out a normal person. I guess pain doesn't really have a essence or look. It just looks like clear, but like something supernatural kind of has that blue energy. Or maybe it's specifically blue because it's from Lim. I don't know. Which does seem like a very interesting thing, because now it goes like, okay, so what about Olivia and Lim? Because obviously this whole psychic connection is causing a problem with their relationship, which begs the question, what's going to happen? Like, Lim could always turn Olivia, and then she could go to Kai to potentially get cured, or we might see Lim give up his vampirism, because it's actually interesting, because I think him and Donette kind of bonded over the fact is of like, they wanted power just because, like, obviously last season we know where Lim's situation came from with the whole how he became a vampire. And I think maybe on some level of like things kind of being rough in Donette's life, her life not being what she wanted it to be, and just kind of, wanting strength because so many other people just kind of pushed her around and treated her however they wanted to. I think Lemuel could kind of empathize with that. So I think that's why he was so ready to give her multiple chances, even though Olivia wasn't willing to. So we'll ultimately see what happens. But the question will be like, will Lemuel be willing to give up his powers? I think for Olivia, for things to kind of be good between them, that's the only way that he could get rid of the psychic bomb. But that's the thing though, like if he unbecame a vampire, like there's no going back to being the vampire he is right now. At least I don't think so, because it was Manfred's grandmom that made him like that in the first place. So not unless he becomes a vampire again and then Manfred does some stuff, or like whatever happens gets reversed or something like that, because I feel like that's potentially the route they're going to go down, but maybe not. We'll see in the long run, because like I said, things just aren't all good on their front, which is also interesting because we're talking about relationships. There's Bobo and Fiji. there's like a lot of Final Destination stuff happening of just things not like lining up. It's like, oh, plants are dying. Also, like stuff is falling and trying to kill Bobo. Specifically Bobo. I was wondering, like, is it not just something coming after? I mean, there's always a chance it's coming after Fiji, but maybe it is specifically Bobo. Maybe there's something or someone that has a thing for Fiji that's trying. I mean, like, remember that was kind of the whole point. Like, Kokonara wanted her in the first place, so it's kind of like maybe something similar in that regard. It is kind of a shame because it's like, oh, you finally found each other. Oh, you're so happy and everything like that, and you being together and in love and kind of get your thing on might legitimately be putting Bobo, if not both of your lives in danger. So that kind of sucks. I'm curious to see what that ultimately ends up being. But what was interesting to me was the whole Joe storyline, in the sense of Joe ended up picking up something from the pawn shop from Bobo, and it turns out to be a dagger. And because obviously because him and Bobo had a conversation of like, oh, you find your purpose. Bobo put his past behind him and opened up a bar. And it's like, oh, Joe, you need to find your bar, your purpose. And he's been ignoring Walker's calls. And I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. It didn't really correlate in my head to think about it last episode, but it's like, yeah, you and Walker killed some demons last episode. Probably something you're not really trying to broadcast around, considering, your SO is also a demon, so that's definitely going to be a complicated situation. And I think that's probably even more so why he probably doesn't want to talk to Walker, because they did that. And it's like, because killing demons like that with Walker made him think about the good old days and stuff like that. And also Joe's reputation kind of precedes him. So if he probably found out that Joe's dating a demon, him and Chewie are married, right? I'm blanking on it. I don't think they're just dating. They're married, right? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, because they've been together for like wasn't it like 1,000 years or something like that? They've been together. I think so. I could be misremembering that, but nevertheless, yeah, so that's probably going to turn into a situation. But I think that's what that's supposed to signify, like Joe looking at a knife, him stepping down that realm again of being hunting demons and stuff like that, which that's probably something he's going to like, oh, me and Walker are going to go out and do this, while secretly keeping that from Chewie, which I'm curious, like, what's going to happen first, because Walker's a normal human, so he probably can't sense a demon, So we'll see in the long run what ends up happening in that. But that's what I'm thinking, that's setting that up. Him kind of, and because he looked at the blade and he kind of smiled, because it's probably like there's that urge inside of him after that night of like, oh yeah, killing demons is kind of what he does best, It's that angel side of him of like, this is what I was kind of born to do, and, looking for a purpose and stuff like that now. So, like I said, we'll see in the long run. Something else that was kind of interesting was before she disappeared, Carolyn told Manfred about their secrets in the woods. And at first I was like, oh, what secrets in the woods? I don't get it. And then it's like, oh, right, the painting. It's like, right. And Manfred goes in there and he touches the head that's inside, and it just ends up sending him back. So it looked like he kind of tapped into whatever that thing is. Who knows why it's so important to Kai, but it is. Maybe it's tied to his powers or something. Maybe we'll end up finding out that Kai's not the normal human that he pretends to be. Maybe he's something ancient himself, and that head potentially belonged to one of his, like, a past lover, and she was killed, and basically he's in midnight searching for revenge against the person. Because what if it turns out that that's a demon? Because we see a sword, and that sword, it didn't look like it, but it kind of slightly reminded me of like Joe's sword, because it seemed like it might be kind of a sword / dagger, almost like just the way it looked and just the blade and everything. So not unless Joe's the one that did it. I don't know if Joe and... No, because he was there that night, but I don't know if like Kai if that ends up being the case. Maybe it's not. Maybe she was killed by an angel. I mean, we know how angels kind of are in this world, so maybe that can kind of fit with like, oh, that was someone that he loved, so maybe he's a demon, or maybe him and Joe kind of have a lot in common of like, oh yeah, like he's something else. Maybe he's just a human with some special abilities, or maybe, I don't know. I feel like if he was an angel, I feel like Joe would know, and also like him doing what he's doing, Joe would, because even Joe's like, taking away something supernatural, that's not something anyone should be able to do. So he might be something else. Maybe he did something to make himself something else, which is kind of weird. I'm kind of saying it like that, but nevertheless, either way, I'm very interested to see like what that ends up being ultimately. Oh yeah, another thing too I thought was kind of interesting. I want to tackle on too is like the interesting thing that Joe said. If like, oh yeah, him being an angel would make it so that even what he is could never be taken away by Kai, because like it's beyond just being a supernatural. It's something a little more. So that was kind of an interesting thing to me. I'm like, huh. Which even the whole thing of like, oh yeah, Manfred, he could easily take away your powers. Which Manfred's like, if it was just a year ago, like I would have easily jumped at the opportunity. But now he realizes the good he can do with his power. It's not as much of a curse as it is kind of a blessing in some regards. At least now it is, finding his way in Midnight, realizing like how much good he can do with his abilities. It's like, no, especially because it's like, yeah, his abilities kind of make him normal and Midnight, and that's kind of the whole point. Like everyone came to Midnight because they wanted to find a place that they belong, and Kai kind of potentially could give them that place outside of Midnight. But we'll see in the long run what ends up happening with all that. I'm very interested to see what the next episode has in store for us. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.